Okay, so the first step is to launch your favorite browser. I'm gonna launch Google Chrome here. Let's search for download Visual Studio 2015. So the first link here, download official site, is the link we want. And in fact, underneath there's an older downloads Visual Studio. That's the one we really want, but let's go to that from here. So as you can see on the page right now, the 2017 is the version that's currently quickly available to people. What we want the older version, which is 2015. So here, if you scroll down, you can see this button that says older versions. Click on that. It'll take you to this page. Now, people who have MSDN subscription can sign into their MSDN subscription to get it. But also, if you're not a subscriber, you can still join the Visual Studio Dev Essentials for free and get it from there. If you haven't signed up already, so you have to sign up here. Signing up for this is free, but it's a required step for us to be able to download the Visual Studio 2015. In my case, I already have an account, so I'm going to sign in with my account. Alright, once you're signed in, you'll see all the featured downloads that you can download, but you can't find Visual Studio 2015 still in here. The way to find it is you can search or simply click on this downloads button. So once you click on the downloads, it should be in this list here. A quick way to find it is to search for Visual Studio Community 2015. So as you can see here, as of this recording, we have the latest version is Visual Studio Community 2015 with update 3. And that's the one you're gonna want to download. So click on that. It gets you to this page here. Now, depending on your system, if you have Windows 64-bit or Windows 32-bit, you get to choose which version you want. Since I have Windows 64-bit, I'm going to click on 64-bit here. And this button here will allow me to download the Bootstrap installer. This allows you to tweak what you need to download and install on your machine. So go ahead and click on this to get the web installer. At this point, as you can see, I have the web installer quickly downloaded to my machine. Alright, in this video, we successfully downloaded the Bootstrap installer. In the next video, I'll walk you through the steps necessary to install and configure Visual Studio 2015. So see you in the next video. Okay, so now that we successfully downloaded the Bootstrap installer, let's click on it so that we can launch it. And at this point, we can close the browser because we don't need it anymore. So now as the installer is getting ready to start, I will wait a little bit. Alright, so now it's launching. By default here, it says it needs up to 7 GB of disk space. I'm not gonna pick the default. I will choose custom so I can pick and choose what I want to install. Now hit next. From this one here, I'm gonna expand programming languages. I definitely want C++. I personally want to add more stuff here because I use Visual Studio as my main development tool. So I will pick Python as I want it, Windows and web development. I also want to use SQL, click once, and PowerShell stuff. Universal Windows apps, I'm going to click on that as well. Scroll down, common tools, cross-platform. All that stuff you don't have to actually choose. It is completely up to you what you want and what you need. Just make sure as you click and select these things that you have enough disk space and that you are okay with the amount of space needed. In this case, it's going to take up to 36 GB to install everything, which is fine with me. Like I said, I use Visual Studio a lot, so I'm going to keep it as this. Now I'm going to hit next to start the installation process. On this page, it's just showing you what will be installed. Fine with me, so I'm going to click install. It's now prompting me for elevated privileges here. So I'm going to click yes and let it start. I think it's going to take some time. It may take me 30 minutes to an hour if not more. So I'm going to pause the video until it's done and come back later to continue afterwards. Okay, setup is now complete, but it's asking me to reboot my machine. At this point, we're done with the installation process, So I'm going to reboot, and then next we can look at how we can launch and configure Visual Studio for the first time. Okay, now depending on your version of Windows, you should be able to search for Visual Studio and find it. I'm using Windows 8 here, so I'm going to search for Visual Studio. I get two hits here. The first one is Visual Studio 2015, so I'm going to click on it to launch it. I also want to pin this to my taskbar as a shortcut for future use. Alright, so it's asking me to sign in now. You can sign up and create an account so you can use it for things like Windows Azure and Git repository as a source control management for your code. Right now I'm not going to do any of that, so I'm going to click on not now, maybe later. Now this is where you get to choose your preferences. Of course, you can skip this for now. You can always change it in the future from within Visual Studio if you want to. For me, this is the best time to set my preferences. So for the most part, I'm going to choose Visual C++ as my development settings. Then, as you can see, Visual Studio has 3 different color themes. My favorite happens to be the dark theme. The default is blue, which is what most people use. But for me personally, after using computers over 20 years with editors and staring at the screen, I feel that the dark theme and the black background is a lot easier on my eyes, and that's why I like this option. I'm going to click on Start Visual Studio now, and it's going to prepare it for first time use, as you can see. Okay, so now it's done preparation, and this is how it looks like with the dark theme that I picked. If you don't like the dark theme and you want to change it, you can go to Tools menu and click on Options, then click on General from the left, and this is where you get to change that again. As you can see, it's the same color themes that we saw, blue, dark, and light. So you can come here at any time and change this. I'm not going to change it because this is what I want. This is pretty much it, and we're now done with setup and installation of Visual Studio. Now I can close it, and since I have the icon pinned to my taskbar, I can launch it again and again at any time I want to. Now we're ready to use Visual Studio and start learning to code with it. In this lecture, we will learn how to write and compile our first C program using Visual Studio IDE this time. You will learn how to write your first C program, then compile it and run it using the Visual Studio IDE. So let's get started. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, meaning that everything you need to write, compile, and run, and debug, and test your code can be done from within that same visual environment. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so I'm here on my Visual Studio, and let's see how we can create our first Hello World program using Visual Studio. There's 2 ways we can create a new project. The first one is from this start page. Here it has a new project item. You can click on it. It will launch the new project dialog. That's one way. Let me show you another way to do it. Cancel out of this. From the file menu, you can say new project as well, and gives you the same new project window. So from the first list, make sure we have Visual C++ selected. From the second list here, we want to pick Win32 console application. Win32 here means it's a Windows application running on the Windows environment. So it's a Windows console application. So now we pick this. Let's give our first application a name. Let's call it Hello World. And as I was typing the name of the project, you see the name of the solution has been the same as my project. By default, the Visual Studio will give me the same name, This is not necessarily a really good practice if you have more than one project inside the solution, but for now, let's just leave it as is. That's fine. The other thing I wanted to notice is that the location here can be changed. This is the default location. You can browse and pick another location. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just stick to this one. And the other thing here is it's by default going to create a directory for the solution. So my project is going to live inside a folder that's inside the solution folder. So it's like a child folder of the solution. Okay, so let's click OK. And now on this page, this is the Welcome to Win32 application wizard. There's nothing here to do except clicking on next. On this one here, as you can see by default, it has console application. You can still change your mind and make it a Windows application. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave everything as is and hit the finish button here. As you can see now, Visual Studio has created for me a hello world.cpp file. This is a C++ application. If you look here, the file extension is .cpp. We cannot use this. By default, Visual Studio will create a C++ application for you. I wanted to show you before we do it manually how Visual Studio will give us some boilerplate code that's actually C++. This is not how we want to do it. So let's close this solution from the file menu, go to close solution, and let's start again. Let's start over with file, new project. And this time we're going to make a slight change. Make sure it's Visual C++, again, Win32 console application. And let's call it this time hello world from C. Hit OK. Same thing here, next. Now on this page, I'm gonna just select empty project instead of the precompiled header and all the other stuff. If I click empty project, it disables everything else. The security development lifecycle SDL checks does not impact us. We can leave it as is. The main point here to know is that empty project means it's not going to create any header or CPP files for us. Hit finish. And let's take a look. Okay, so as you can see here, in my solution, Hello World from C, there's one project and it's called Hello World from C, same as the solution. Inside it, there's a few virtual folders and there are no files inside. It's completely empty. So let's go ahead and create our .c file. Make sure you select the source files, right click on it and click on add and then pick new item. From the new item dialog here, we're going to select Visual C++ and it's already selecting C++ file. We just want to change the name here from source.cp into hello.c. Hit enter. As you can see now, it has created the hello.c for me. That's part of my project now. So double clicking on this will open it in the text editor here. As you can see, it's an empty file. Let's do what we did on the command line, which is write our first hello world, include standard. As you can see, the nice thing about an IDE, as I am typing, it's actually using IntelliSense to autocomplete. Auto-completion is kicking in and it's actually helping me out here. So I can pick, I don't have to remember anything. I can say now, I need a main function and I'm gonna return void here. And we're gonna do just our printf hello world. Okay, semicolon. So as you can see now, if I even hover on a function like printf, it will show me what this function requires in terms of parameters, what it returns, etc. And it's really nice. This is a lot more useful than just being on the command line or using Notepad. An IDE has a lot of bells and whistles that you can benefit from. For example, here also this feature which can collapse the code blocks. If you have a huge code, expand collapse is also useful. You can always right click on the header file and open the document. It shows you the content of that document. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more options here. One thing I want to mention as well is that next to the hello.c there's a asterisk, which is a star. That means the file is not yet saved. If you want to save it, you go to file menu and hit save. hello.c, or Control S from the keyboard. Another way to save it from the toolbar here, there's this save hello.c icon. There's also save all files icon. So let's do Control S on the keyboard. Now, how do we compile this? From the build menu, we can say build solution, or from the keyboard Control Shift B. And let's try the keyboard Control Shift B. Okay, so now it's building. See here, it succeeded, and the output executable file name is hello world from C.exe, which is exactly the same as our project. So typically the executable target is the same as the project name. You can change that, but that's the default. Okay, so now how do we run this? Multiple ways to run it. You can see here from toolbar, there's this green button that says play, which is actually gonna launch it inside the debugger. Another option to look at is from the debug menu. There's a start debugging and then start without debugging. Start debugging is F5, start without debugging, Control F5. We're not going to do start debugging for now. At this point, it's enough to just launching without the debugger. So I'm going to hit Control F5 on the keyboard. And now you can see the output here, hello world, then press any key to continue. Notice that we did not display this press any key to continue. It's added by default by Visual Studio. And the reason for that is it has launched a console window for us. Without this press any key to continue, it will have to close it immediately. But it just puts this in so we can see the output and hit any key, then it closes. However, now there's if you have noticed, there's an issue here, which is that it seems like press any key is right next to our hello world. Why is that? Well, apparently our printf does not inject a new line character, so we need to tell it ourselves to inject a new line character. Let's see how we can do that. We need to use the new line character, which is a special character, also known as a control character or as a escape sequence. So \n is the new line character, the new line escape sequence. Printf understands \n and it looks at it and translates that into a new line. So let's see that in action. Control F5 on the keyboard. As you can see here now, Visual Studio immediately before it runs, it says, hey, by the way, your project is out of date, because it knows that the C file has a new date, newer than the exe. So it's asking you, would you like to build it? Yes, I want to build it. It will build and automatically run. So let's zoom in here. Now you can see press any key is on its own line because the new line character actually moved the character return down by one line. Cool, so that fixes it. Just one thing I want to mention here is that because we're running on Windows and the standard library that printf is part of is actually doing some work for us here. On our behalf, it's actually translating this into two characters because Windows requires two characters in here. It requires \r/n. In fact, this also is valid. You can run it this way. Let me test and show you that. And let's zoom in. See, it's the same. It's just still the same. Anyways, like you can use either one. Typically, people use \n when you start dealing with files. When we look at files, we need to be very careful when dealing with the new line character because Unix files use the \n and Windows files would require \r/n. If we want our code to be cross-platform, we need to take care of that. So just keep that in mind. Let's try this on 2 lines and run again and show you how this works. Okay, so now as you can see, each one injects a new line. Okay, cool. What other things we want to talk about here since we're in the IDE? Another thing is like if I take out a semicolon here, see how it quickly has shown me like a red squiggly line on this one here. If I hover on it, see it says error expected is semicolon. As a matter of fact, this is very nice because the IDE, even before you compile, it knows C and C++ well that it tells you ahead of time saves you time. But if we even try to compile Ctrl-Shift-B, I'll show you like down here. You can see down here the errors. You got 2 errors, expected a semicolon, syntax error, and it shows you it's on line 7 inside your file, missing a semicolon before identifier printf. So this is really cool. Even if you double click on it, it just takes you there, which is really nice. So my recommendation at this point is to give it a try. Please try it yourself. Take the time to write your first Hello World with Visual Studio. The best way to learn is by starting to, fiddle with this thing, break it as much as you can, try it out, and get to know the compiler, the editor, etc. Okay, so as a summary, what we did in this lecture, we wrote our first C program using Visual Studio IDE. We learned how to create a Win32 console application using the UI, the graphical interface of the IDE. We used a .c extension. We should never use a .cpp extension because that is for C++. So keep that in mind. And we tried to break it and understand how it works, look at the compiler errors, etc. In the next lecture, I think it's prudent to actually drill down into our Hello World. I think it's better to actually first take some time to understand what we did and how this is all tied together before we start diving deeper into C. So see you in the next lecture. Let's walk through the program that we wrote one more time. This time I'm going to focus on explaining every single element of the program so it's more clear and you understand why we need these things. Starting with the include. As you can see, the hash include is actually a preprocessor directive, and we will learn about preprocessor directives in future lectures. But the hash include is very important because we need this to bring into our code files external functions like the printf. In this example, we're actually including standard IO, and the hash include is used to include another file into this file. Usually the file we include is a header file with a .h extension. So that's the main takeaway from this, is that the hash include brings in code that's in a different file into our current file. The standard IO is standard input output. It's part of the standard C runtime, and it's one that includes things like functions for printf, if you want to print to the screen, user input, things like that. It's all defined in standard IO. Keep in mind that C as a language is a very small language. The keywords are around like 32 keywords, and it adds extra functionality to itself by using external functions and libraries. Standard C runtime is one of these libraries. Void keyword. As you can see, this is a C keyword, which means nothing or no arguments. Main function is returning no values to the caller. Of course, in our case, if you remember, main is the entry point, is the main entry point for this program, which means that the operating system calls into the main and it expects main to return some value to indicate whether it succeeded or failed. But you can ignore this value and you can just say void, I'm not going to return anything. We will learn more about functions in future lectures. What I want you to understand is that main is a function. It's the only function in our program, and it returns nothing to the caller. We're still talking about main, so main again is the program entry point. Keep in mind that it's case sensitive. It's all lowercase letters. If you mistype it and you try a capital letter in there, you will get a syntax error. It won't compile because it expects main to be the entry point. It cannot find it in that case. Since main is a function, each function must have its name followed by parentheses. Then it has a function body between this open curly brace and this closing curly brace. So each function must have a body enclosed inside the curly braces, and it must use parentheses like this. If your function happens to expect some parameters, if any, then they are passed in between the parentheses. We will learn that more in depth when we talk about functions. But if you just leave it like this means that my function, main function, does not need any input parameters. That means that parameter list is empty. Another way to do it is to say void in between the parentheses, and void here is optional. I mean, I typically don't use the void, I just use it this way, just to make it more like other languages. Curly braces are used for two things: for function body, like in this case the body of the function, or to start a new code block. You can nest them inside each other, but you have to keep in mind that they have to always match. Each opening curly brace must be matched with a closing curly brace. Right, printf. So printf, it's a C function that is written by some external library. It's actually hosted inside standard IO library. The library comes in two files, the header file, the body of the function, or the code, implementation code of the function is actually inside a .lib file. This is one way where C can be extended by using libraries. A C library is a form of reusable C code. It's a binary format, and it can be generated by C compilers. Actually, we can create our own libraries, and maybe we should do that in future lectures using the Visual Studio. We can create executable files and .lib files, which are called C libraries. There's something called also DLL, which is a Windows concept. It's a dynamically linked library. We will touch base on that in a future course when we talk about Windows programming. But right now, it's all focused on C, so we might actually touch base on the C library in this course. So printf takes one or more arguments in. The main one is the first one, which is called the format string. The format string, it just tells printf what to do, what to output on the screen. In this case, it's just a series of characters, literal characters that it will just spit out on the screen. There are some escape sequences in here, \r\n. These are considered like escape sequences, special characters that printf knows how to execute them in a different way. It's not going to print out on the screen R or N. It's just going to take this as a control character and use it to change the position of the caret on the screen to go down to one line, etc. Okay, just to understand the Newline character, make sure it's clear. On Unix, the Newline character is a \n. On Mac OS Classic, that's version OS 9 and before, it's \r. The new Mac OS X is now using the \n for the Newline character. Windows and DOS has always been \r, \n. And for web protocols like HTTP, they also enforce \r, \n. The standard C libraries like standard IO or the OS try to encapsulate and handle the \n translations for us. However, some freestanding platforms and compilers may not translate \n as you expect, and the result may not be the desired one. For example, some dumb terminals may not expand \n to be \r, \n, and then you get all the output on the same line. Take special care when you're dealing with files, because the files are tricky. If you want your code to be cross-platform, you cannot rely on \n, because again, Windows wants \r, \n. On Unix and Mac, this will not work inside files. Some kind of translation may be needed. You need to check your environment, platform, and compiler, etc. So I just want to clarify this. If you run into issues, just keep this information in mind. So again, printf is used to output text to our standard output. In this case is a screen. As you can see in this first hello world, our program has one function, which is the main function, that calls another function, calls printf. And the parameter for this printf is a string. Strings are usually enclosed between quotation marks like this. Okay, so now this statement ends by the semicolon. And if you remember, we discussed in previous lectures that each single statement that the C program has must end with a semicolon, especially if it's a single statement. But there are times where you have like code blocks like the curly braces. In that case, you can skip the semicolon because the compiler will understand that this actually is an indication of a code block. You don't have to put a semicolon on every line, right? For example, the void main, it knows that this is where it starts, this is where it ends. It doesn't need any semicolon. But for this statement, if we didn't have this semicolon here and you had another statement, it will be confused whether this is a single statement or its continuation is on the second line, etc. That's why we need a semicolon here. There are some rules. We will learn that more in the future lectures. I hope this was clear. See you in the next lecture. This is called the start page. It's divided into three main areas. This is the command area. It has shortcuts to creating a new project, opening an existing project, or opening from source control. The second area it has is the recent project list. So this is the most recent project. And then this area here is just showing some news and RSS feeds and links to articles and videos from Microsoft. And if you scroll down on the bottom here, you can see that it has two options. One says keep page open after project loads, and then show page on startup. If you uncheck this, it will not show again. If you close it like this and you decided you want to see the start page again, you can go to the view menu and choose the start page from here. It will launch it again. So that's the start page. Let's talk about the file menu. From the file menu, I can create a new project. And as you can see in the new project window, from the left pane, you get to choose the language. And then in the middle, there's a selection of a project you want to create. So you pick the project, and then it allows you to name it, give it a name, pick the solution, the location for the project. And then here you get to pick whether it's going to be part of a new solution or if you want to add it to an existing solution. You can't create a project that doesn't live inside the solution. It has to have a parent solution. You get to choose the name of the solution. Typically, when you start typing here, like for example, test, it names your project and solution the same name. From this option here, you get to choose if you want to create a separate directory for the solution so that your project lives in a directory inside the solution directory. So the parent directory will be the solution directory. By default, that's checked for you. You can uncheck it if you don't want it. You also can add this to source control if you want to work with Git or TFS from Visual Studio. So that's the new project. Let's cancel out. The next item on the file menu, which is we're going to skip these, but you can from here create a new file. Say if you have an open project, you want to add a file to it, a header file, a CPP file, or just a general text file or any kind of file. If in our case, if you want to create a .c file, then we can say just open this, create a new item and add it to the project. I'll show you how to do that in a future lecture. Okay, so cancel this. And then next, you can add a new project to the existing solution if you want to. You can close the solution from here. You can close any open file from the editor in here. Save to disk. You can also work with source control and print the files. So that's the file menu. Let's actually try to open our project from previous lectures. Hello world from C. So as you can see, when I say open project, it actually here picks all project files and solution files. So I'm going to use if you're not sure what kind of file you're trying to open, the type here says Microsoft Visual Studio Solution. So I'm going to open the solution. And that will open up our project from previous lecture, our first Hello World project and solution. As you can see, it's already loaded here on the right side from the solution pane. I'm just going to double click on Hello C. There you go. It's now open in the editor. Like I said, you can save if you make any changes. You can close this file again. I just closed it and I can go back to here, double click to open it. So that's the file menu. The edit menu allows you to work with the clipboard, so you can cut, copy, paste, or delete a selected text. And also it allows you to undo, redo some changes to your code. And also you can select all the code, you can replace, you can do a quick find and replace in the code. And there's some advanced stuff here like tabifying, anti-tabifying your code, etc. Then you can view the white space. Let's see it in action. Let me show you an example. For example, if I highlight a text like this in here, if I go to edit, I can copy this. So now if I have it copied, I can hit enter on the keyboard. From the edit menu again, I can say paste. See, now it's copy pasting from the clipboard. The other thing is undo, redo functionality is very helpful. If you did something to your code and you want to undo that, you can come here and say undo. See, now it undid my cut of the previous action. I can go back and redo it. Then, between the two, you can always decide if you want to keep this change or remove it. From the keyboard, you can use Ctrl Z, Ctrl Y. I often tend to like to use the keyboard. Let's say I want to highlight hello. Let's see how I can delete that. If I select delete, it's gone. I undo, it comes back. So what else we can try? Let me make all this word here, all this text actually uppercase. We can go to edit, advanced, and make uppercase. Now everything is uppercase. I say Ctrl Z, undo it to undo that change. So that's it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Let's talk about line numbers. How do we show line numbers next to the code here? It's very useful, especially if we have a lot of code. Like for example, if I copy paste multiple times and we want to talk about a specific line number, how do we do that? Well, luckily Visual Studio has an option for that. You can go to Tools menu, hit on Options. From this dialog, make sure you select the text editor. Instead of doing it for a specific language, we can also do it for all languages at the same time. Click on all languages. As you can see here, there's the line numbers option. It's currently unselected. Go ahead and select that, hit OK. You can see here on the side, inside the margin, it's showing me the line numbers, which is a very useful feature to have. The other advantage to it is you can also from the edit menu say go to, and you can say I'm gonna go to line number 4, for example. Now it goes to line number 4. That's how we use the line numbers. I recommend that you turn the line numbers on. So that's it for the line numbers lecture. Let's talk about white space and tabs. First thing I want to do is open my Hello World from C solution. As you can see from the file menu, you can go to the recent project and solutions and pick the most recent one from here. That's another way to open the project. Okay, so now that we have the project open, if you remember from the previous lecture, we talked about how to show the line numbers, which is very useful here. So now I'm going to show you the difference between tabs and spaces and why one is preferred over the other. First of all, let's see how we can use the tab key on the keyboard. I'm going to hit the tab key to indent my code here further in, as you can see. Now if I want to do the opposite side, you can hit on the keyboard shift and tab key, and that actually unindents your code backwards towards the left side. So tab goes inside, shift tab goes backwards outside. So let me just indent this a few lines inside, and then I'm gonna copy this. See here like why there's this extra space in here. In a minute we'll find out why. There's probably some additional white space that we inserted. Enter and then Ctrl V to paste 1, 2, 3, 4 times. That's good enough. Save it, Ctrl S. In order for us to see the white space, there's an option in Visual Studio from the edit menu. Go to advanced and then there's this view white space. Click on that and now as you can see it's showing all arrows. Arrows stand for tab key in this case. So these are all actually tab keys. I'm gonna delete this from here. Alright, so I'm gonna keep 2 lines as tabs and then I'm gonna remove this here and use a space instead. So delete and then on the space bar key hit until it's the same, exactly the same location. Same for the last one here. Do it like this. Now I'm gonna save it. With the white space visible, we can see like this is different, right? But if it wasn't visible, we won't know the difference. So why is this important, somebody might ask. So let me show you. If you try to open this in a different text editor, let's see how we do that. See here on the file name, you can right click and say open containing folder. This will open the folder that has the file and automatically selects the file for you. I'm gonna try to open this in a different editor. Let's try Notepad. Here, open with Notepad. Now you see like only 2 lines are showing, the other 2 are missing. If I maximize this guy, you can see here now 2 lines are actually here and 2 lines are here. Why is that? Well, that's because tabs we saw in Visual Studio, each text editor might actually translate the tab size differently. So this guy, I don't know what it's doing. Look how much white space in here versus the actual space, the white space, which is the space bar, right? Because it's a 1 character size versus the tab can be translated to multiple. Each tab might be 8 characters, or some other editor it might be 10 characters, 12, who knows. If you use the tab keys or the tab spaces inside your code, you will end up with some code that's not well indented. So as a good common practice, we should get rid of the tabs and only keep spaces. There's a way in Visual Studio to actually fix that. I'll show you in a minute, but let's try this in another editor just to confirm this. So this is Notepad. I'm gonna right click on this again, and I happen to have Notepad++ installed. So I'm gonna open it with Notepad++. Immediately you can see the same problem here, right? So that's why the first thing you wanna do with IDE, with your text editor, is to always use spaces instead of tabs. Let me close this guy here, go back to Visual Studio. So how do we fix this? For pre-existing files like this one in this case, for example, if you happen to have code that you've written many years ago, there's a way to do it actually by doing Edit, select all, and then go here and say Advanced and tabify selected lines. When you do that, see, it actually took out all the tabs, put in spaces instead. So that's a way to fix existing lines of code. But what about new lines, right? If I do now like this, tab, tab again, tab key is still showing me tabs in here. Well, I want away from Visual Studio to always treat tab key as expanded into spaces. Luckily, there's an option for that. So if you go to Tools menu, Options, and you go to Text Editor, make sure you select it for all language if you want to do it for all language, or if you want to just do it for C# or C++, that's up to you. I like to do it for all my languages. I'm gonna click on tabs, and here, as you can see, instead of the option, the default option, keep tabs, I'm gonna say insert spaces instead, and I'm gonna say each tab key size is 4 spaces. Then hit OK. Now let me delete this and then start hitting the tab key again. Now, as you can see, my tab key is inserting 4 spaces instead of inserting actually tabs. This is very useful and very handy, and I recommend that you actually go make your tab size 4. So that's it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. From the edit menu again, we have this option to say find and replace. There's a quick find, quick replace, find in files, and replace in files. So let's start with the quick find. As you can see, there's Ctrl F on the keyboard. So if you click on the Ctrl F or on this menu item, it's the same. Let's say I want to find the word hello. If I type hello here, as you can see, as I type, it's actually highlighting the word hello for me. If you hit enter, or as you can see this arrow here, it says find the next. It will find all occurrences of the word hello. Also notice that here it says, you can say make it exactly the same case. So if I have typed hello in different cases, it will only match the case. And this one here, it says match whole world. So if we had different words without whole words, it's not going to find them. So as you can see here, it's actually searching the current document, but there's a way you can say all open documents, or the current project, or the entire solution. Entire solution means even if the solution has more than one project, it can scan all projects. Current project means scan all files in this project. All open documents is just all the documents that are open in the text editor, like all the tabs open in here. Current document means just this text file. Maybe if we can copy this again multiple times, and let's do one that says hello, hello, for example, together. Okay, so let's copy it one more time, paste it here, and this time I'm gonna make it all capital letter by going to the edit menu, then advanced, make uppercase. Okay, so now let's see the find and replace in action. So go to edit, find, quick find. So if I type hello in here, as I type, it's finding all occurrences that match my search. Keep in mind that right now it's not case sensitive, it's finding all occurrences, and it's not matching whole words only. And if I just select match case, see the one that's capital letter is no longer matching, so it's not highlighted. If I undo this and I just say match whole word, see it's only matching these ones, finds it. So if it's right now highlighting the first find, when I go to the next, you can say find next, 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 next. All occurrences are being found because we have unselected these two here. There's also a way where you can say find all, and then this uses the result window down here. If you can see the result window, it says it found 6 matches. It's showing you on each line which one matches, so which is really nice. If you select it, it actually directly here goes. See this little thing? It's showing you that this is where it found it. Okay, so this is how find works. Let's talk about replace now. Similar to find, replace allows you to find text, but on top of that, it also allows you to replace it. So you find it and replace it. So let's see that in action. Let's go to edit menu, find and replace, quick replace. This is the text you want to find, and this is the text to replace it with. Let's say we want to find hello again. And what do we want to do? We want to replace it with bye. And as you can see right now, it's highlighting 1, 2, 3, 4 occurrences because I have the match case and match whole world selected. If I uncheck this, this means just even if it's not a whole world, subset of a world, that's fine. Uncheck match all. Now it's actually going to replace everything. So let's do only whole world. There's 2 ways you can replace it. The first one is by hitting replace next. This does it one at a time. And then there's this next button, which is replace all. Keep in mind that this is in the context of current document. You can say only in the current block, meaning this code block, or in all open documents, this project, entire solution. So let's just stay with the current document. Let's do one at a time. I'm going to hit next and see how the first one on line 5 is going to be replaced. Okay, so the first one is replaced. Next one, do the next one, and do the next one. And now it says no more occurrences. Let's undo. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. I'm just undoing. This is just to undo everything we did. Now I want to show you how to do replace all in a single click. Hit replace all. See, now it's done all in one click. So this is pretty much quick find and replace. You will find this to be very useful when you start writing a lot of code, and it's going to be handy. So please take the time to play with it, be familiar with it. And that's it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. So let's talk about debugging. First of all, let's define the term debugging. Debugging is the process of finding and resolving bugs or defects that prevent correct operation of computer software or system. The origin of the word debug may go as far back as 1878, but the first computer bug goes back to an incident at Harvard University in 1940 when a Mark II computer had a moth stuck in it, which caused problems, and they had to remove the bug, i.e. debug the computer, to fix it, and hence the term. The term I want to leave you with and I want you to understand from this course is that debugging nowadays is the process of stepping through code line by line and examining it for troubleshooting to find and resolve bugs or issues. So that's the term debugging. Let's see this in action and see how we can debug our first hello program using Visual Studio. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so I have Visual Studio up and running, and I have my Hello World program here in Visual Studio that's already open. So let's talk about the debug menu. The debug menu has many items on it that are useful for debugging. The first one, Windows, shows you all the windows related to debugging. That includes breakpoints, exception settings, output window, immediate window, etc. The output window here is this one here. So this is the output window. Back to debug menu. The start debugging menu item allows you to run your program in debug mode, meaning that you can step through the code line by line. The other option, which is the one I use mostly to write code, is the one that says start without debugging. This one has the Ctrl plus F5 on the keyboard. To debug a program, there's another program or process that we use called the Debugger, which actually is the one that attaches itself to your program at runtime, and it can control the execution of the program step by step and monitor it. So that's the way where the Visual Studio IDE can talk to your program, step through it line by line, by using the debugger. Other options in here are not necessarily important now. There's the step into and step over We will talk about that again in the future. Toggling breakpoints is a very important feature of debugging. We will cover that in a future lecture. Alright, so let's see how we can debug our program here. From the toolbar, you can see the green button here, just the same as the debug menu, start debugging. Same thing from here, so let's hit this one. And now it's, as you can see, it's trying to run my program in debug mode. Debug mode is a lot slower than actually running it without the debugger, because the debugger intercepts the execution of your program step by step, and that's why it feels more slower, and it also loads some data to understand and help you with the debugging. That makes it slower as well. It actually ran and finished immediately because I have no breakpoints in here. So now, how do we step into our program without setting a breakpoint? Just for the sake of this lecture, I'm gonna show you a cool tip from Visual Studio, which is the recent versions of Visual Studio. I'm not sure if it's 2013 and 2015 or even 2012, but the most recent ones, I have 2015 here. If you click on step into or step over, Visual Studio will launch your program and stop at the first executable statement in the entry point, which is the main in this case. So even if you have a huge code base and you don't know where your entry point is, just by loading that into here and clicking on either step into or step over, you should be able to find out where's the first line that gets executed. Now you can see it's at line 4. This yellow arrow is actually for the current debugger is standing at this location to be executed. So let's hit step over. I just quickly stepped over. Let me show the output. Now it's showing hello world in here. It just did that for me quickly. And now I'm at this location. I'm at the end of my function main. So now it's showing you that it's at line, call stack shows you where it is inside which function. It's at line 6 in, inside our main. And printf return 15. Okay. So now we can stop debugging by hitting this stop icon here, or you can just say hit continue to finish to the end. Let's try hit continue. And now, as you can see, it says your program hello world has exited with code 0. So I hope this was clear and useful. And like I said, we will dive deeper into debugging in future lectures. So for now, just understanding how the debug menu works and how we can step into the code, the difference between F5 and Control F5, start with debugging and start without debugging. If you get that from this lecture, that will be great. Let's now talk about the build menu. So the build menu is a very simple menu. It has a few options on it, unlike some of the other menus. Usually there's only one solution open in the Visual Studio. Building a solution means go check on any file that hasn't been compiled recently and built, and it will actually go scan everything. And if anything is out of date, meaning that the build was out of date with the current sources, it will kick off a new build. So it only builds what needs to be built. That's the main thing. Same thing on the keyboard. You can do the same thing with Ctrl-Shift-B. That's what I usually use, Ctrl-Shift-B on the keyboard. The next option is called Rebuild Solution. The difference between this one and the one before, Rebuild Solution actually forces the solution to be rebuilt from scratch. Even though you did not make any changes to any of the files, it will still force a rebuild. And it does that by deleting all the executables or the output files or the intermediate files and restarting from the beginning. So that's the main difference between build and rebuild. Build is only going to look at the ones that need to be built. Rebuild, again, will always force a rebuild. And actually, the next item, Clean Solution, simply gets rid of all the output and intermediate files. So think of rebuild as Clean Solution followed by Build Solution. And the last item on this menu that I want to mention is the Compile, which is the same as I think Ctrl F7 on the keyboard. It actually compiles this current file in here without actually generating a full build. It just compiles the file to verify it passes the compilation. For example, I take out the semicolon from here, and then I go to the build and I say compile. Now you can see it's showing me a semicolon is expected. That's a syntax error. So I put back the semicolon in here and then go to build compile. And now it says succeeded. Let me try one thing. Let me clean the solution. Just hit clean and just compile. Just says succeeded, but it doesn't really generate a project. So it says the project is out of date. This actually does compile, but it doesn't generate the project. Okay, now let's try to rebuild the solution by using rebuild solution. Okay, now the solution has been rebuilt. Okay, so if you right click here and say open containing folder, you can see here there's hello.c along with a folder in here that has some temporary files. If we go one level up to the solution folder, here you can see another debug folder that actually has our application in here. This is an application. This is the generated exe from compiling this project. And this is a debug version of the project. We will talk about debug versus release in future lectures. That's it for now. See you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at solutions and projects. Mainly, we want to understand the relation between solutions and projects, how the solution files contain the projects inside them, the relationship, etc. So let's get started. A solution file is nothing but a virtual container. It houses one or more projects inside it. So when you create a solution, basically you're creating a single file that has some metadata, some information about all the projects contained within the solution. It's used to group and apply properties across one or more projects. The nice thing about solution files is that you can apply properties across multiple projects from within the solution. You can also specify dependency between one project and the other in the same solution. Building a solution will build all projects in that solution. Building a solution by itself doesn't mean anything. It's just a shortcut to build all the projects within that solution. The solution in Visual Studio consists mainly of two files. The first one is the solution file ending with the .sln extension. That's the solution file. This file is the solution definition file. Just an XML file, a text file that has some information about the solution, the projects within it, and some settings, some properties, etc. It describes all the projects on all the relationships in between them. It's highly recommended to change the solution name to avoid confusion with project name. This is extremely important when you have more than one project in the solution. Throughout this course, we may not do that just because of simplicity and trying to minimize the amount of changes we want to do, but in real life projects, it's recommended that you change the solution name. Like I said, better to give it a different name than the default one. By default, when you create the first project, Visual Studio gives the solution the same name, so try to get in the habit of changing that name. The second file that the solution contains is called the solution user options with extension .suo. This is mainly to keep track of user customizations made to the IDE and to the solution, the way the solution is displayed within the IDE, the layout of the windows, which window is open, which window is closed, which one on the right, on the left, and which one's collapsed, expanded, etc. So really it's just for tracking the user customizations to the environment. Okay, so still on the solution file, you can create virtual folders inside the solution to organize your files. They are not going to be mapped to a physical folder on your disk, but just for grouping and organizing your files. Each solution has a startup project, and the startup project will be the one that's bolded, and that's the one that's the active project. When you add files, when you try to compile, it acts on that one. Alright, so that's it for the solution files. Let's talk about project files. Project files help organize our code. So as you can see here, my Hello World project has all my source files in it, and it also has virtual folders. Folder for source files underneath is my C file, folder for header files, resource files. You can create as many folders as you want just for grouping and organization. The nice thing about the project file is that it maps one-to-one with the compiler target, meaning that when you compile a project, the generated compiled binary, such as the exe or the lib or the DLL, is going to be similar to your project file name. There's ways to change that in the project settings inside Visual Studio, but the default is that it's going to be the same as your project. It's important to know that the C projects have the .vcxproj extension. The C#, for example, has a .csproj. The Visual Basic has a .vbproj. So VCX is the Visual C project file extension. And like I said, we can create virtual folders just like we do with the solution. That's it. Let's see an example where we can work with multiple projects within a single solution. So let's jump right into that. Okay, so I switched to Visual Studio here on my desktop. Let's see how we can open our existing project from the File menu. Click on Project. I'm going to go to Hello World and select, as you can see here from this folder, I'm going to select the solution file, and it's called, here it's not showing the extension, but this is my Hello World from C.sln file that I'm going to double click to open, and now has opened my solution here inside the solution. Let's try to add another project to this solution. So I'm going to click on File menu and I say New Project. I'm going to make it another C++ 132 console application. And here I'm going to say, instead of creating a new solution, I'm going to make sure it to be added to my current solution. So click on Add to Solution. That will get added to our current solution, and we're going to make this project name, let's call it Second Project. Okay, hit Next. And here I want to make sure it's an empty project again. So it's a console empty project. Hit Finish. Now it's creating the new project. It's been added to my Solution Explorer here, if you can see. Now I got two projects. I want to add another C file here to the second project. So I'm going to go to Source Files, right click, Add New Item. And from here, Visual C++, CVP, I'm just going to change the name to, like, let's call it second project.c as well. And it's been added here. And now let's add include standard io.h void main. Since this is a separate, completely separate project, I'm going to say printf hello from second project. All right, so Control-Shift-B on the keyboard to compile this guy. Now it's compiling, and it successfully compiled it. However, I want to show you the difference between active and non-active project. Right now, since Hello World from C is the active project, if I hit Control F5 on the keyboard, it's gonna still show me Hello World because that's the active project. It's not gonna run the second project. So there's two ways to run the second project. You can come here to the second project, right click on it, and from the right click you can say debug, start a new instance. That will actually start it, but in a debug mode, right? It will attach the debugger. If you don't want that, it is recommended to set it as the startup project in this case. See here this option, set as startup project. That one here, set as startup project, means that it's going to be the active project. Right click again, set startup project. And now you can see immediately that if I zoom in, that second project is bolded, whereas Hello World from C is now not bold anymore. So that means if I hit Control F5 here, it's going to run the second project for me here. As you can see, now it's running the second project, Hello from second project. The other thing about this startup project, it's persistent, meaning that if I close my solution and try to reopen it, this time I'm going to reopen it from the recent projects and solutions. So it's the first one here. Okay, so now it's been reloaded again. And if you look closely here, you can see the second project is still the active one. And if we run it again, in fact, it's going to show me hello from second project because it's the active one. You can always go back to right click on any project and make it the startup project. So that's how you can make a project a startup project. Let's set it back to the first one. Okay, so now my first project is now active again. I just want to show you another feature, which is building the solution from the build menu. I want to show you how to build all projects in the solution. If I say rebuild solution, it's going to actually go ahead and rebuild every project in my solution. Project Hello from C has been rebuilt, and second project has been rebuilt. So you see both of them have actually been rebuilt, and both executables have been created. So that's why build solution is very convenient. It builds all the projects. So that's the solution with 2 projects in it. We can right click on the solution and look at properties here quickly. And it will show you the 2 projects in here, the properties of each project. You can apply things here, comment to all of them. And again, this is another way to set the startup project from here. Okay, another thing I want to show you is the dependency between projects. When we right click on a solution, there's project dependencies here. For example, let's pretend that Hello World from C depends on the second project. So you simply say, click here. That means that Hello World from C requires the second project. So that means if I clean, let me right click and clean the second project. Now I'm cleaning it. So now in order to run my Hello World, even though Hello World is built, if I hit Ctrl F5, because I said it depends on second project, it thinks it needs to, build the second project here. If I say yes, it will build it for me and then run my Hello World. Even though in reality there's no dependency, but this is a way for you when you have a project. Let's say you have an exe application that depends on multiple libraries that you built yourself. In this case, you can say this application or this exe depends on this library and this library, etc. So that's why it's useful. I hope this was useful. See you in the next lecture.